Hi, this is Golden Boy Games. This is my first video, and I will be making an analysis of games and their progression, reviews, and an overall look at the world of gaming. This will be the first video in a series about the evolution of a franchise and how the game changes to reach a broader audience. I thought it fitting to start with the Mafia series with the recent announcement, but I plan on doing videos for Assassin's Creed, Mass Effect, Dragon Age, and the Madden series. For now, I will be glancing over the original Mafia and the place it holds in the series, as I have not played it, and plan on revisiting it when the remake releases in August. I played the original release of Mafia 2 back on Xbox 360 in 2010, and the release of Mafia 3 in 2016. As a brief overview, the Mafia franchise focuses on stories about organized crime in the 20th century, and uses fictionalized versions of American cities as its setting, while using history as a backdrop for their main story. The original Mafia was set in Lost Heaven, a city inspired by Chicago in the 1930s. You play as Tommy Angelo within an Italian mob family. One of the aspects that set Mafia apart from the other GTA-esque games releasing at the time was its grounded in reality feel, and it is something that they would keep as a core design philosophy throughout. While driving throughout the city from mission to mission, from activity to activity, you would have to observe normal traffic laws, speed limits, and hit-and-run type scenarios. So if the police caught you doing any of these things, they would either arrest you or give you a ticket. These were the little details that made Mafia unique and set itself apart from other open-world games from back in the early 2000s. It had multiple different releases, initially on the PC back in 2002, and was eventually ported to PS2 and Xbox in 2004. Now, since I had never played the original Mafia, I'm gonna skip over it because it wouldn't be fair to analyze any of the gameplay or story elements until I've actually played it myself. So I'm gonna move on to the release of Mafia 2 in 2010, which means players had to wait a full 6 years after secondary release and 8 years after the initial release of the original Mafia. One of the most important elements when analyzing the evolution of a franchise is its release schedule. With modern gaming being so business-centric, the schedules are tight and are normally fairly consistent, except for a few outliers. But Mafia actually was pretty consistent with its release window of 6 years between games. One issue when looking back on the release of a Mafia franchise is maintaining a base of fans is incredibly difficult when releasing on 3 different generations of hardware. And so now, when we go back and look at the gameplay and look at the 3 separate games on their own, it's very difficult to tell that they're a part of the same franchise. But when you look at other series like Assassin's Creed or Mass Effect, you can see similarities between the games. Even if there's an evolution and a change in the gameplay, we can tell that they're a part of the same franchise. Whereas with Mafia, it is a little bit more difficult as the leap between technology between the 3 games is so astronomical compared to other game franchises. One of the other failures or oversights, more likely, that the developers had was not developing a consistent narrative or interweaving the 3 stories of the different Mafia games. There is a relationship between Mafia 2 and Mafia 3, but it is so minimal and it's essentially just a side character. So now I want to talk about Mafia 2, my introduction to the franchise, and at the time it was one of my favorite games of all time. One of the great successes and biggest misses for Mafia 2 was it was known as an open world game, but the world was empty. When I look back, I see it more as a pseudo-open world game. This is a narrative-based game where you drive the story forward and enjoy it, almost as if you were on rails. That is not a bad thing, being on rails, but feeling like you are not is incredibly difficult. And I think Mafia 2 is one of the games that hid its on-rails nature the best ever. Now here is where there may be some spoilers, but only for the beginning of the game and how it establishes characters and the world and the motivations for these characters. The game introduces you to Vito Scaletta, a Sicilian Italian who immigrates to a fictionalized version of New York City just prior to World War II. Quickly, he has to resort to crime to help his parents get out of poverty, and this results in him being arrested and placed in the army to aid in the invasion of Italy, due to his ability to speak the language and translate. This section is used as a tutorial for the game's combat and is the set piece that sets up the game from there on out. The tutorial ends with Don Callow, the head of the Sicilian mob, arriving in an American tank, making an entire Italian garrison surrender to him, just because he said so, as Vito says. This sets up Vito's motivation for the entire game. Him wanting that respect, him wanting that power to help his family and to help himself throughout his life. So when he returns home and sees his best friend again, Joe Barbaro, and sees that he has connections to the mob, it's a no-brainer for Vito. A war hero, a vet, a soldier. He's the perfect candidate for the Italian mob in New York. And this one interaction returning from war will set up Vito's entire story for the rest of the game. Now, I do have to say that when I replayed Mafia 2 with the new updates, the game has more issues than it did before, at least to my memory. A lot of buggy movement and issues in the fluidity of the game in simple situations, like for example here when traveling in buildings. But hopefully with some patches and updates, these visual glitches can be fixed. But in regards to story and as a narrative-based game, you can't get much better from an early 2010 game. The gunplay is a little stiff and doesn't feel quite right. Pistols feel very strong and submachine guns can feel weak, but it does things that make you immerse yourself in the world, like fix your engine if it gets damaged. I know it's a small feature, but it's the small things, the details that make this game good. Blood on the ground when you walk through and leave a trail with your boot prints, having to change your clothes to lose your wanted level, or change the plate on your car to use it again after being chased by the police. Additionally, some environments are destructible, which feels awesome when using the Tommy gun. This is a game I replayed multiple times and have thoroughly enjoyed. This is a 10-hour game and if you really rush, and 15 if you take your time and enjoy. Now at the time of recording, the game is $30. If you own the game previously, it will automatically upgrade. This is the case for both Mafia 2 and Mafia 3. So now, on to Mafia 3. Mafia 3 takes place in New Bordeaux, a fictional New Orleans. It stars Lincoln Clay, a half-black Vietnam vet, and the game capitalizes on the history and racial tension in the South back in the late 60s and early 70s. It uses history in a much more direct way from the story than Mafia 2 does. Now I have to say that at the time, Mafia 3 had some of the best facial capture in video games around, and the cutscenes were remarkable. They created one of the most well-told and captured story cutscenes, from music to emotion, from the actor portrayals to even the film grain over it. But this game is the perfect example of how games evolve to reach a further audience. Some major changes were made to the core of the game. The driving was changed to a more 1970s action movie style, a la Bullet, with cars flipping and sliding all over the place and blowing up in glorious fireballs. Even the grain over the game the whole time, and the way the cutscenes are shot, it all has a consistent style that is fantastic and fits with the tone they are going for. With Lincoln being a vet, he has a base for more brutal tactics. When dealing execution-style finishes, it's brutal. Lincoln is a tank of a man and used it in that way. Mafia 3 also attempted to take from GTA a bit and from Saints Row with the way districts work. This gameplay loop of doing a few standard missions, then a mission to take the neighborhood got old quickly because of the lack of unique experiences at the time of release. But now, at the time of recording, the game is much improved with many side activities added. It also has to be mentioned that the soundtrack for both games is brilliant. In Mafia 3 specifically, it has an assortment of the best Vietnam-era rock songs that are absolutely timeless. Just to digress for a moment, Mafia 2 also had fantastic music, very, very timely, and the developers did an excellent job of keeping all of the music within the time period. So the goal of this series is to create some sort of system to rate franchises, and should they be played in their current state, should you go back and revisit things. So for now, I'll do a simple out of 10 system, but I would appreciate feedback and any suggestions on how anyone feels I should go about rating these games. So overall, the Mafia franchise is excellent, but the lack of clear direction and the missed opportunity of having a cohesive story to bring it all together brings the score down. The franchise is a solid 6 out of 10 and should be played by any lover of Mafia stories, and if you own it and haven't touched it, it's a must play. But there are a lot of games out there, and I don't know if it's worth the asking price right now. Thank you for watching, and hopefully my first video wasn't too bad. But give me some feedback, let me know, and the next video will be a beast, as it is for the Assassin's Creed franchise. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much.